It's a very difficult word, brand. I think when I talk to a lot of people, particularly senior executives, they normally say, yes, a brand is my logo, it's my advertising, but of course a brand is much more than that. A brand is about everything a company stands for or a product stands for. I think if you were to break down the components of a brand, they would fall into a number of areas. Firstly, your identity. By that I mean what you stand for as a company, as a business. Secondly, the values of your company and whether you live those values, truly live those values. Thirdly, your personality. How in the outside world you express yourself through the way that you identify yourself on your website, through your literature, and through all forms of communication. And probably most importantly, behavior. I believe that brands are about people and about experiences, and great brands are built from the inside of a company, not from the outside. So behavior, corporate behavior, I think is becoming more and more important. And then finally, I think ultimately performance. How does the brand perform? How do you measure that performance to build a strong brand, to build a strong reputation? So those I think are the key territories that I would identify of what a brand is all about. Consumer brands are what you, myself, experience and deal with every day of the week, whether it's a product, whether it's a service, so whether it's something we buy in the shops, whether it's a service we receive from a service provider like Vodafone, and it is the experience you have of that brand that makes the difference. The corporate brand traditionally has no contact with the consumer, or very little contact with the consumer. The corporate brand's job is primarily to address the stakeholder community such as shareholders, investors, regulators, NGOs, and so on. That's changing. It's changing quite dramatically. But those are the two sort of key roles. What you and I consume and experience are consumer brands, and what the investor community deals with is the company behind those brands. That for me is the key difference between the two. What's happening right now is that consumers want to know more about the company behind the product. When I go to a supermarket now, I look at people and they look at the back of the label more and more. They want to know, where does this product come from? Is it from a good company? Is it a company I trust? Is the quality of the product from a company that is a quality company? So the corporate brand can't hide anymore. The corporate brand is now having to be much more open about who it is and what it stands for, because consumers are now in control. The consumer is asking more questions about the social responsibility, the environmental policy of the company that owns the brand. So you can't hide anymore, and that's the key difference. And I call these not corporate brands, but company brands, because they are somewhere between the consumer brand here and the corporate brand, and they are beginning to merge more and more. Really three key almost hygiene factors now that drive this new type of brand. One is transparency, absolute transparency. You can't hide anything now. Markets are conversations. There are conversations going on about your company that you don't even know that are happening. There are people out there who know more about your company than you will ever know about them. So you can't hide. Transparency now has to be a given. And there are indices out there that track transparency in corporate reporting, for example, and they publish their findings. And I will be touching on that later on today. I think the second thing is authenticity. You cannot pretend to be something you're not. Too many companies were bad companies hiding behind the veneer of a brand promise that was simply not true. So you have to be authentic. In the developing markets now, more and more, in China, Brazil, India, companies or consumers look at the company behind the product, because they need to be sure that the quality of the product can be reassured by the quality of the company behind it. So authenticity is becoming so much more important. And then the last thing, I think, the third most important thing, is probably what I call provenance. People want to know where things come from. They want to know the origin of the product. They want to know if it's come from a country that has a good environmental policy. They want to know about the origin of the company. And a lot of companies try and hide their origins. They try and hide behind the country that they come from. You must never ever do that. A strong company brand will always celebrate its roots, always celebrate its origins and where it comes from. And I think that's really important. So the three things: transparency, authenticity, and provenance. Those are the core components, I think, of the new company brand. I believe that he is the keeper of the beliefs of the company. He has a role, probably one of the most responsible roles within any organization. It's probably not respected enough. I think that it's going to be a challenge for organizations and CCOs in the future, because they are managing multiple stakeholders. The old role of the Chief Communication Officer managing the voice of the Chief Executive has gone. He now has to manage the voice of the company, and he has to ensure the consistency of that voice, whether it be through all channels and multiple channels today. So it's a difficult job. I think the analogy that was used yesterday is they have to keep lots of balls in the air and stop the balls falling down, and that's a good way of thinking about it. So it's a challenging role. I think what you do is amazing, and I would like to sort of say how privileged I am to be part of the advisory board and help in whatever way I can, because you're doing an amazing job. I think that your role, you have a multiple role. You manage reputations, you manage brand, you manage the way we measure reputation and so on. But for me, I think that if there was a vision, and you have a vision, the way I would interpret it is that you turn bad companies into good companies. Unfortunately, in recent years, we have found out that there are a lot of bad companies out there, hiding behind their brand promises. And there's a lot of cleanups going on right now, with those companies becoming excellent companies and returning to be centers of corporate excellence. I think corporate excellence as an organization can help accelerate that, can help facilitate that. There was a book written some years ago by two professors called From Good to Great. They identified these companies that were good companies and said, what was it that made them great companies? And if I was writing that book again today, I would turn it around and I'd say, your role is to turn great companies into good companies, not bad companies. So if I can help in that way, then I'd be very happy.